If your practice sessions look something like this, then you are doing something very wrong. Guys, how often do you show up to a practice thinking you want to get in some good quality table time in just for it to end up being some kind of 5-hour ego challenge? I'm sure for most of you that is the reality of your arm wrestling practice sessions. A couple of hours of just banging away, going all out, and by the end of it, having your arms feel totally messed up for the next couple of days. But does that have to be the case? Of course not. And in this video, I'm going to tell you why you're doing arm wrestling table time wrong and how instead you can use it to improve your arm wrestling. So, arm wrestling training lies on a spectrum, and what I mean by that is that on one end, you have guys like John Brzenk, who has said that throughout his arm wrestling career, he is almost exclusively trained using only table time. On the other end, we have guys like Todd Hutchings, who almost exclusively trains in the gym. Now, obviously, both of them are very accomplished athletes, and even though they might be outliers in the fact that they are both extremely gifted, I'd like to think that it is possible to use either method of training to improve your arm wrestling.
And I can say for sure that you can be strong only from arm wrestling. At the same time, the first several years, maybe 5-6 years of my arm wrestling career, I was mostly lifting weights, and I can say that you can be world champion only from lifting weights as well.
But for this video, I just want to focus more on how you can use arm wrestling table time in your training program. And this can roughly be broken down into 2 ways. Number 1 is using table time as the main driver for progressive overload. Number 2 is using arm wrestling table time as a tool for technical and sport-specific improvement. Now, depending on where your preferences lie on the training spectrum, you're gonna be using these 2 methods to varying degrees. So first off, which is what I think is the hardest to do, is if you're someone like John Brzenk who prefers to only use table time for practice. And for this, you're not only gonna need a ton of discipline to hold yourself back from overtraining, but you're also gonna need a really good training partner. That's because your training partner is gonna fill the role of what ordinary weight training is supposed to do. They will be the one who will progressively overload you on the table over time, so that you can make arm wrestling table strength gains. You can go about doing this in several ways, such as number 1, using resistance bands, number 2, having your training partner use an additional hand to assist,
my training partner for the world. You think that you can beat her? Come here!
or number 3, holding your partner with a disadvantaged grip and then working from there.
And into the straps now. We're going into the hook. No, we're not in the hook once again. Taking control, and there is that ugly King's move.
Other than how hard it is to actually find someone who is willing and able to train with you on a consistent schedule like this, it is also extremely difficult for 2 reasons. The first reason is that you can't track exactly how much force your partner is resisting you with. If you're lifting weights, 5 pounds is always going to be 5 pounds. But your training partner is a human, and between session to session, or even within the same session, the amount of force they can apply is going to be different, sometimes by a lot. And this is going to make tracking your own progress extremely difficult as well. The second reason is that it is very hard to train certain muscle groups purely on the table. Sure, your arm wrestling specific muscles like the hand, forearm, and upper muscles will probably be worked out pretty well, but bigger muscle groups such as your triceps, your shoulders, your pecs, and lats, they're going to be severely neglected. So, is it technically possible to use only the table to train? Sure, but for most people, this might not be the most practical way. Moving on to using table practice as a supplement to weight training. Now, this can be further broken down into doing both table and weights in the same session, or having different distinct sessions for weight training and table time. I've observed that the first way is done by some Russians and maybe Bulgarians, and what I've generally seen done is that weight training is done first, followed by lighter technical work on the table. It's done in this order specifically because the weights are meant to be the primary driver for progressing strength. So if you do the arm wrestling first, you won't have enough energy to put in enough effort for lifting weights. The second way is a little bit more common, which is to have a dedicated session or a day for arm wrestling and a separate session for weightlifting. This can be done by having multiple sessions a day or by arranging the sessions on different days.
Right now, I'm lifting weights in the morning, maybe 30, 40, 50 minutes in the morning. After that, 2 hours weights in the afternoon and 2 hours arm wrestling in the evening.
It all really depends on the intensity of the training and the recovery ability of the individual. A general approach to this is to have one arm wrestling table practice a week, and then to have the rest of the days focused on weight training and recovery. It is entirely possible to squeeze in a couple more table practices a week, but you'd have to have the discipline to not go too hard during these table practices. A single hard table practice can mess up the entire week's weight training schedule, which can then slow down your progress greatly. Personally, after training in arm wrestling for 13 years and coaching and mentoring a bunch of people along the way, I found that generally, as you become more and more experienced, table time becomes less and less important and weight training starts to become more of a priority. If you're a beginner, sure, go for more table practice and fine-tune your technique. You can focus more on table practice for the first year or two, but at a certain point, the technical improvements you can make from table practice are going to plateau, and that is when you should start to make the conscious decision to adjust your training as necessary. But ultimately, the best training program is the one that you can stick to consistently over a long period of time. So, find out what works best for you, and you're going to make way more gains than if you were to just focus some sort of preset program by somebody else. And if you guys are interested in coaching arm wrestling training, I do offer that on my website, link in the description below. I'm Greg, and I'll see you in the next one.